There we go.
There it is. Hey, all right. Hey, thanks, Shadow. You got a guess in? That's that.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, very good. Hey, that's good. So how do we start all over again? Hey, thanks very much, guys. Now I can hear it. Hey, very good, Die Hard. That's good. I don't know if you picked up some of the earlier conversation. I'm going to go back and review very quickly. But I went through a whole series of sketches here in terms of putting together. Let me go back to this one right here. I introduced the start of the program, and my thanks to Shadow for coming in and saving the day. That's great. So I'm glad you can hear me now. So what we did here after last week, I went through a whole series of this evaluation of what kind of subject matter to work with. So I thought maybe doing some really neat empathic interceptor studies for like Star Citizen advanced vehicle aircraft design. Now I started using, pardon me, this whole family of shapes here you'll see now are called empathic sketches. They're not quite speed forms, but they're more akin to, for example, like doing an emotional feel about how do you see certain things in your mind's eye about developing a shape and a form. So it's interesting that I just did a whole quick series of little fast strikes here. Later on in the show, I'll show how those empathy strikes came about. But you can use them as very interesting approaches to either an elevation, or in this one down below I saw it was a plan view. So they're very quick empathic sketches. And the empathy is that you get a personality or a character about what you're looking for, and then you're going to assign it either an elevation or a plan view, or it could be a section. I mean, I've used it everywhere. For example, it's a great universal language because you can use it in any given craft, whether it's architecture, product design, interior space, detail work. It's a great way of opening up the mind in terms of looking at certain shapes and forms without being, quote, habitually locked into your favorite shapes and forms. It forces you outside the box. So there's the first one I kind of described a little bit here. Go back and look at these guys. This is the second one I put together. Let's move these over here so out of the way. The second one I put together was just another quick empathy strike. But again, look at the character you start to get. If this became an elevation again, let's just put ground zero right in here. Let's say that's elevation right there. Now you come back in, finish off the form. Look what begins to happen here. That becomes canopy. Now you pick this form up, run it through. Maybe that does that just right quickly. This becomes a canard again. Comes off in main form. This kicks up just a bit, and it just drops right back in. I mean, look at the shape you're developing there without getting a lot of fuss and really developing some interesting things. Now, what's missing is a main plane of a wing, but you can add that on, for example, when you start to get into some of the forms here, and open that up just a touch. And then, all of a sudden, you've got a character there that's away from the ordinary, and I think that's what's unique about it. Same with this one down below. You can use it as an elevation, or you can use it as a plan view. If you turn it the other way, for example, look what begins to happen. If you pick up that shape right there, that real strong dart right there, and picked it up and then opened it up again to this, let's just change the canards here. Look at the difference you're going to come. If I put a center line in this, right in through there, and it just mirror image that shape, all of a sudden, look at the form you're going to get there very, very freely, and without a lot of effort. But it takes, and I'll say this very carefully so it's not misunderstood, it's a lot of developing the sight pattern. What are you looking for? What are the shapes are you beginning to perceive? And that doesn't mean you're predictable. It means you're looking at, what about the possibilities of opening these things up and making some really unique changes away from, quote, typical aircraft technology, and moving the benchmark a little bit out there in left field. So here we go. Let's go back to another one here. I'll just walk you through these guys. Notice they're very quick, very abstract, but at the same time, with a lot of content. There's an interesting thing happening in this guy down below. Again, I would say stay with this one as an elevation. It's all done. I mean, look at that. You've got this into wing, into tail, into overset intake, and then in canopy below there. I mean, again, if I were to put a center line on this thing again, or an elevation line, let's do this. I put an elevation right through here and just called that ground zero and ran it right through the form. Called that zero. Look what begins to happen here. Now I've got this. I can come back in and connect that dot here, pick that up. Pick this up, open this back up a little bit, carry this line on through, and just kick it back. And with this, it becomes the main plane of the wing. That might be an intake area here. I can come back in and add that to it. Canard off of that. It comes into the wing itself. Going to tint that in a little bit here. A little bit of shape in the form here. Look at this. Three streaks underneath it. I mean, look at the difference in that form. And it's not great, but I mean, it's just the interpretation. Look what you're after. I mean, it just does it automatically. It's just a very intriguing way to open up the window of opportunity here. And I think that's the great thing about me, for example. Today's purpose is to get out of the habit of being so predictable and take a chance at developing some new form here by using empathy as a real quick strike series. So we're going to keep going here. I'll show you a bit later on how that begins to open up and work with it here. There's another study here. Okay. There's another one. I mean, look how again, they're almost self-containing. Is there elevations? They're done in elevation, but again, I keep thinking about, well, if it's not an elevation, what about a plan view? What happens in a plan if I pick up that little diamond form here and then pick up this line and add a wing out here? Look at the difference in the character you get there. So what do you think, Die Hard? Is this making sense so far? I'll get your feedback on this. I don't want to go too quickly here, but I just want to really stress what begins to happen to some of these shapes that you're dealing with. And these were done, again, in elevation format, but that's so unique in terms of putting it all together. Again, look at begins. Let's do this. Just add a sketch here. What happens in this case here? Up on top. I come back in again. This is canopy right here. Let's open that up. So I'm using a positive or negative form there. There's canopy. This comes into that form, goes underneath, kicks in. This comes through, comes back, picks up this. That becomes a forward canard into shape. And come back in and form this on through. Let's take that line through and just add this to it. Another wing plane coming off of that format right there. Now maybe that has a little bit of a negative in it. And again, put a canard off of this thing coming right through that letter number there. Just it's kind of knock that out of the way. But just put that in place. Let's put a little bit of shape to this thing. Just put a surface. Look at the difference. All of a sudden, you've got a language there. Very interesting things in terms of putting together shape and form and put it all together. Definitely, I think I learned several member. Thanks, Die Hard. Definitely, I like how quickly shapes and flows come into picture with the early concept sketches. Yeah, I spend way too long with details too early, and I get stuck on this time before trying me. Yeah, I think that's a great observation, Die Hard. And I don't think, believe me, that's not a criticism. I go through the same thing too. But so often I get into a situation where I find myself in that same process, and I break out of it by going through this empathy stuff that really helps to open up the whole opportunity of thinking. It's just really interesting how we do get caught up in details, and sometimes it's just nice to let all that go and just kind of free reel with some things here in terms of looking at what empathy can do for you. Let me carry on here. Yeah, don't be discouraged by your commentary. That's a very common practice. Variations in approaches. Again, look at sometimes. I'll be the first one to admit you get to the point where the empathy becomes so complicated. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. In a case like these, very often I come back and I look at maybe just typical things like what's happening in this. Could that be a canopy area here? If I put a center line through this and say, is that area here? If I use that same surface and come back through its center line, break that in and let that become canopy, and then add some of the shape around that. For example, come into this and open that up and just connect those dots like that. Then open this back up again, come in and pick up the center line, which is right through here. All of a sudden, I've got another shape to work with. So it's not really, you're not looking at the actual form that you've developed kind of complete itself. It just really, it opens up the door of possibilities. And sometimes, like in this case, these are very busy looking. I'm not really a big fan of these, but you go through these processes to rinse them out of your system. And I think that's what's unique about it. Very unique in terms of approach. Same thing down below, very complicated. We go back, I'm going to move along here very quickly. Now, some things here again, notice how you begin to look at some of these shapes. This is self-explanatory. Again, look at canopy, overhead intake. I'm going to gesture change back in through here. But again, all done for the predication of getting newness. And if I turn it 90 degrees, all of a sudden, look at this. There's a dart here. I were to take that same in the plan view here, and I open that up. And I come back in and just close the door here with this. And I pick up that to that. Then all of a sudden, kick this out, and then kick this out, and get a whole new look at airfoil. I mean, look at this. It's a little bit geometric, but that's okay. And right back into center line again. Look at that. I mean, that all of a sudden, and by changing the proportion, it'll look kind of interesting. It looks like a fire. Yeah, it does. It does have a bit of it. It has, and that's what it does. It changes the thinking process and opens up the opportunities for developing certain things in real time. So again, this is number 6. I went through a whole family of those empathy sketches just to let you see how that begins to function. And then when I went through it, I said, you know what? There are some themes in there that might have worked pretty nicely. So I went back and did some quick elevation sketches based on some of the ones I just looked at here. If I can dig those back out again, let's see which ones I thought had the most potential to maybe look at something unique. I think it was one of these families here in the first 2 or 3 studies here. Well, it's 2. Here. Yeah, I think there's something really kind of what I thought something pretty unique about character-wise in this study here. I mean, it's not the greatest, but I just thought it had some real personality. Call it the Phoenix. Yeah, that's not bad. Coming out of the ashes, cool. I love when Doc turns the page 45 degrees or upside down. Yeah, that changes the format quite a bit there, Shadow. There's no question about that. So the next series of sketches I'm going to show you came out of, let's just kind of line these up a little bit here. Look at how that form right there, this one right here, began to pick up on what these sketches are doing. This sketch right here began to pick up on, let's go back to these pencil sketches I kind of moved it around on. There it is, there it is, and let me dig these out here. Yeah, this is it. So let's save that one as the theme page. Then we went to these. There it is. From that family, I mean, I went ahead and looked at this form right here in terms of what it might be looking like and just kind of picked that one out of the blue here. Something about that had a pretty nasty looking shape to it. It was very unique. So I got to that guy. I moved on to these sketches right here. I mean, just took some of the things that we're looking at here. The overhead was in it, and this kind of simplified the shape a little bit. More so in this last sketch here, getting a lot more of the mirror of what this guy was doing here up on top. So that interpretation and empathy came this little elevation sketch where the whole process of airfoiling was over the top of the canopy or the body form itself. And it really became a pretty unique little set of circumstances. So let's hold on to that for a minute. So once I went through that family of sketches, I went right back into doing some very quick little thumbnail sketches here. And we just kind of put these aside, and I'll keep these together in case we need them a little bit later on. Then I went back into some elevation, or pardon me, plan view studies based on some of the things we looked at earlier too. You can also go back to this shape and look at the variation. Look at this variation, and then out and back and kick in again, kick out again, and developing some of the plan forms and shapes up on the form to make that thing work melodically and hopefully get that some pretty interesting shapes here. The spears and some of the very polar triangle looking pieces up on top, get these Interceptor sketches to work with. So that's where we are as far as some of those thumbnail sketches, at the end of the black and white pencil. Because I think what I was looking at here, I'm going to go back to some of these earlier sketches, see if I can dig out where this arrowhead process came from. There's a couple of them here that were done. Let's go back and look at these guys. If I can pick out the right one. Yeah, this one started that family of forms here. So I went back to this page for this particular pass and looked at these guys. Looked at this piece here, if I can get it all together in the plan view here. Just kind of look at what this does. So a little bit more, see how they kind of relate one to the other there? So I kind of pull off of this piece here, some of that very dart-like or arrowhead canopy process, and came back in and added some of the surface work behind it to get some of the shapes to work for it. Again, the value of that whole process of empathy is to take it away from being so typical and so very predictable, and just doing some little thumbnail sketches like this. Very interesting to deal with here. So it's a very unique set of circumstances to work with. I hope it opens up the window for you there, guys, as you go through this stuff, because it really begins to, again, challenge us at one end, but it forces into a whole new way of thinking. I think that's the nice thing about what empathy does. So let me get rid of this pencil for a minute. And then when I completed those newsprint sketches, I went back and said, you know what, let's kind of focus a little further here. So I did a series of little thumbnail sketches based on some of those empathy studies, and just kind of tuned it a little bit more and just slowed things down a bit and went to some plan views, a little bit of perspective studies, almost SR-71-like, a little bit more needle-like, and pushing all the hedrals and wing forms to the rear of the aircraft and really kind of pushing things back. So I went to that one. That was the first plate I did. So just again, real sleek-looking elevation study, keeping it nice and simple, very dart-like in the plan view, and really stretching it in terms of getting the form to really work. So it's just interesting, just the Phoenix. And so we came back to that set real quickly. And I went to this guy, just a nice, I went over 300, overhead 3/4, just looking at different ways of getting these plan forms to work. And again, all the emphasis, needle-like up front, almost 71-like, and back to these very flat plane intakes in the back of the aircraft, and some of the nacelle information and the exhaust areas back here. And notice that this little guy right here, that little wing that came off of one of those empathy sketches we were working with there. So did this one. We're going back to those empathy sketches to kind of give me a little impact on some of the sketches that we've done with this thing. So again, opens up the variation and theme. These are real quick, rapid little pencil sketches based on some of the things we just looked at a few moments ago that really open up the window of opportunity. It's a very intriguing set of sketches here. Not great, but just looking for thumbs. And I went back, what if we went round in some areas? What if we went circular in some areas and just kind of domed it and then dropped it back into a real, almost a very organic peak in this thing? So there's another family of sketches looking at the elevation. Again, notice again, picking up some of the same things from the empathy sketches we did earlier and adding much more content into the form itself. And again, this one especially, just an elevation, really nasty, this could almost be a scale bomber of some sort. That's an interceptor. But the character remains the same. You're challenging yourself to see a whole different world of form and shape and characterization of personality, what you're looking for. So let's go back to this. There it is there. Again, this started to take on some interesting personality. I went right back to almost a pure dart. Some of those earlier sketches, again, we did in the empathy. Let's use this guy for a moment. Went back to this plate right here and said, you know what if we went back and began to pick up that same sort of dart area here, especially in the same form, but added a little bit more detail in terms of some of the body shapes inside that. Kind of fun. These are pretty complicated, the arrowhead canopy format, but these kind of simplify those. They just close this up and open that line up, begin to break up the shape accordingly. So that was an inspiration for some of these plates. And last but not least, open this guy up to a series of little family of forms. Interesting thing here, we actually take the actual dart, open it up a little bit, and then come right back into the cross section. Maybe this surface is up, then it goes negative. That's to be determined. It's just a way of seeing these things. By the way you tint them or put tone on the sketch will indicate where the surface is, you well know. So that's that one. And then last but not least, we moved into this guy, which I thought, maybe we make an awful lot out of trying to be too complicated. And again, I'm not being discouraging at all about doing empathy. You have to open that up a little bit and get really kind of formatic with it. But then again, all of a sudden you change the personality. I went back to that same arrowhead canopy process and said, what if we did an elevation that kind of cleaned things up a little bit and came back in and did something like this or a variation like this. It got a bit heavy into here. This is a little more, I think, apropos or more tailored like for the approaches. And I did a 3/4 rear of what this thing might look like. It's just a great big huge flat platform. Notice it's just a little bit of a fuller triangle into the actual engine nacelles itself and then the exhaust. This almost SR, I mean the 117 like, but a variation on a thing that polar triangle to kind of give us that impact to deal with. I thought was interesting look how the whole thing went from very organic to very sheer and very almost geometric in terms of plan forms, being very crisp all the way through the actual set of sketches. So let me stop right there. Anybody, any feedback at all about where we are here with this? And hopefully it's making sense about what the purpose of today's stream is, just to open up the mind in terms of developing new shape, new surfaces, and new ways of seeing certain things that we just don't take advantage of often, and opening things up and becoming extremely dramatic from the content that we get to work with. So that's basically where we are here. So I think interesting things that we're kind of dealing with here, and not at all encouraged or discouraged by the fact that empathy at all times is an incredibly powerful process to deal with and to work with. So let me go back and I'm going to show you just a little earlier that we show you how that whole empathy process begins to work. What I normally work with is this. It's a Conte crayon. It just has that kind of character, very, very stick-like. It's extreme. So I'll use this page. No, I'm going to use this. Keep them on the same scale. Really interesting how this form, when you start with this thing, is very quickly, not overstate it, not to be over quickly with it, but just come in and address. Again, just it's simple. Same with this. Yeah, look at the forms you're starting to deal with there, again, thick and thin. Oftentimes, too, it's pretty nice, too, to kind of break the stick to get a little more edge or take some of the weight off of this thing. So there's one way to look at it. Other thing is to come right back in and just develop a nice simple form and just drop it back underneath it. Again, just as simple as that. Just keep it that fluid. See how it's neat. Yeah, one pass. Again, you get positive or negative form out of that stuff at all. Just again, you can get very geometric with it. And again, look at that. You know, look, a wing drop on that thing. You get really interesting stuff on that. It all begins to function here. So those are the things you can start to come back and add to it. You can come back to the top and begin to look. Look at the begins to automatically. You've got a form right there in elevation that is speaking newness and out of the realm of being predictable. And again, when you turn it the other way, look at the plan view you get on this, these things too. Really interesting how that crossover, for example, and just repeat. If that became center line, this became center line right through here, and then you really just began to mirror image this whole shape, and then brought this form back in over the top and scissored that thing, and then opened that up again, which really was interesting because that's what some of these sketches here. I opened this up to scissor a little bit. Yeah, back to this guy. Notice I used that same scissor, for example, here, that same diamond form, in through here, and just brought it right straight back into the fuselage. So that's part of the game plan here. On top of all that, let's kind of move these aside here for a second here. When you get into something like that, what does that start to do? How are you going to develop this thing? So we took a sketch like this. This is an example. Let's say we took that lower piece, this lower study here, this guy right here, and we begin to look at this thing in terms of putting it into maybe some sort of a format. What does that start to do? Let's build this sketch. Let's build this sketch real quickly. I come back into here and I begin to pick up a plan, center line. I come back and create that dart. And I take that same form out of here and just begin to take that thing and just drop that shape down. And again, come across. That down, run that right through, draw through it, pick up where that's going to be. There's my platform right there. That's what I'm starting to look at. There's my platform, comes across here. Now up on top, it gets real organic. So you got to kind of bring that onto play here. That in, bring that in, extend it, perspective. And again, get that little piece up in here. Drop the nose kind of thing. All of a sudden, now look how that's starting to come together here. This up. Let's put some dihedrals on this thing. This, that. Now again, draw through this just for a moment. Pardon me as I shift gears here. I come up with that platform with this. And back in space and perspective. Forward, and where that lands here, pick that up just a bit, and then just pick up where that canard is. So it comes off of that shape, onto that shape, and then as far as underneath it, under characters, let's kind of kick this back a little bit, change of character. Drop it. Pick up a secondary form here. Run that through. Weight out of that. Hard. Canopy. It's down. Kind of move this around it just a bit. A little bit of shadow in the overhang here. Some of the form that puts to come together. I'm not losing any here. Let me get this back into place here. There it is. Look at that variation from a rear 3/4. Tighten this up just a bit here. Pardon me for moving the form around. Page just a bit. quick little empathic sketches. There's a little variation in theme there based on what that thing might begin to look like. For example, this guy right here, we just kind of took that same form, pulled it rear a little bit, and then dropped it just a bit. There it is. So there's one little theme sketch here. Let me get rid of these guys. We'll just kind of show you how this begins to interpret itself. If we come back and look at this in an elevation, we might be looking at something like this, where we come back in and say, all right, let's just do this. Does it look like an elevation? Come back up with a very strong blister. Take this in the rear plan here. Pop this back. We'll change the variation here. Have a little bit of stick here. And it's just a second again here. Back in the pad, there she is. Oh, there's another little variation in concept sketch there. What do you think there, guys? It's coming together. I mean, notice how the variation, I started with this as an empathy study here. Just going to see if we can get them on the screen in the same place here. Pretty close. I started there with that upper empathy sketch right there, this whole wing group. And again, looked at that as an interpretation to kind of move the paradigm a little bit, change some of the gears just a bit here, and get some concept sketches here. And maybe the nice thing about this guy is, when we've been in this thing, it's maybe more of this. Wind drop. There's a front elevation sketch of that little guy. So what do you think? Are you still with me, Die Hard? Is this making sense here? Just looking, walking around some of the shapes and forms and just getting a little more romantic with some of the forms we're dealing with here as a result of opening up the door with this empathy sketches. It's just really an awful lot of fun in putting these pieces together here. So hopefully this has been some interesting to you and opening up the doors of some creativity here. And let me just kind of do this. And let's go back in and start another sketch here real quickly. And let's see if we can kind of keep this momentum going here, especially with this whole process of the long needle form here that we're looking at here. Let's see what this does. Let's get the shape in here first. Put the platform down. A little thumbnail study. There you go. Just some variations on themes. We're keeping it nice and crisp, very simple. At the same time, hopefully very dramatic in terms of putting. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed a couple here. Need to see the difference between style. Hard angles to have. Yeah, that's great. That's a good point. Die Hard. That's the idea. It's that counterpoint. This system that really works well. Doing multiple concepts gives you a nice variant. And instead of staying locked. Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about. I mean, there's absolutely no comparison whatsoever to just the approach of being much more lucid with what you're starting to see. So these sketches, for example, started with a whole series of forms. Let's go back to some here. With Paper get out of the way. Very sketches like this. That's where we started. Getting a feel for a character or personality, and then just interesting, like the Bell X. Oh yeah, yeah, it's kind of interesting. Just Bell X1, kind of neat. So again, the variation on theme from those empathy sketches. We're looking at and hoping give us some real clues about some newness here. It's going to go back and just kind of wrap this thing up there with a couple more little just elevation sketches and maybe a plan view of this thing. Oh, a couple more shots here. Plan view. Let's see what this guy looks like. Again, a little thumbnail sketch plan view of this top view. Plan view is interesting how it all kind of comes. Just changing the variation of the theme here. And then we get this pad straightened out. One more time here. Let's go back in through here. And there, it's a little family of studies here, put it all together. Just again, whole purpose of today's stream is kind of open up the doors, the windows of imagination, and look at some empathy in terms of developing shape and form, and going through the process of just kind of not getting comfortable with what we typically see. And then go back to some of the genealogy of the sketches here. That was the last one we did, variation on theme there. One here, for example, that's one of the early empathy about that. All the examples we did early on about getting some empathy done. And from this sketch here, this empathy study here, we just started to generate some of these sketches underneath here. This guy became the promoter for some of these thumbnail sketches. So again, using in the very abstract emotional approach here in an empathy sketch to begin to develop what begins to happen in an aircraft interpretation. So it was part of that process. And let's go back in here, not to complicate life. Let's get rid of some of these guys that don't count. So we get those out of the way, and just going to go back through the genealogy here. And we did some of these guys. We actually put plan view sketches based on some empathy studies. The whole arrowhead concept was part of the process as well. That was part of the theme we were looking at earlier. Thumbnail sketches. Back if we get these things in order of some sort. And another variation on theme there. And some empathy studies based on some sketches we did earlier. Some of them were right out of that character, for example. Again, that same arrowhead, very sheer, stealth-looking canopy section, and it went up on top of the overhead intake and the fuselage itself. And let's see, where were some of these other guys we were doing here? And this was where we started, just with that basic first strike or empathy to deal with here. Just I think one of the things that I really want to stress here, wrapping this thing up, is how really critical it is to keep them simple. Keep the empathy sketches simple. And I've gone through some things here, and in my opinion, are very busy. They look very forced. I didn't care for some, but some of the ones we did strike, but there's an interesting portion there. Let's work with some of those things. So I want to be very careful to let you know that the simpler the empathy gets, the more powerful it becomes. It's like a good sketch. That doesn't take an awful lot to do a really nice looking sketch. Just putting the right amount of detail in makes a huge difference. So that's what I was trying to concentrate on today with these interceptor studies. Then we also did a series of these. I'm going to kind of back up on these guys a bit. Went through the empathy series, then did a whole series of these guys. Let's get these out of the way here so you can see what the development was. Back to some really, honestly, very solid wedge-like plan view studies and some perspective sketches based on some of the sketches we did. Looking at an overhead 3/4 and a little variation that they've noticed that overhead dihedral was part of the process from some of those concept sketches we were working with in the empathy series. Again, so another plate. Let's try something around almost dome-like. Would that work? This almost has a scale of a large bomber, but still, again, what if you tried that and gave it a shot? It might not apply, but at least you've looked at something that's a little bit unique and out of the window of expectation. So we did that little study. Then we went back to some very typical format in terms of being very sheer again, almost dart-like and arrow-like. Some little thumbnail sketches, kind of interesting forms here. Also, this is where it kind of motivated that real flat deck, almost simple upper on this thing, and then the body form itself, which led to this sketch. That family of studies there, where also the arrowhead came back into play. A couple of elevations and a little rear 3/4 and a front elevation, almost 117-like. What would that next generation look like? Again, this is a very large plan form, extreme notice. A little bit of section change. Uphill, drops in to a flat, uphill, drops down to a flat, and then it really bevels off on the body side. And then these dihedrals are out at a very severe angle. So again, really helpful for me at any rate to open up this door with this empathy. To look at personality, character, not be predictable, making mistakes, which become miracles. It all begins to work together for the good of the sketch development and the studies we're dealing with here. So I want to thank you for your patience today. There's an awful lot of ground to cover. And I think what I might do, based on all the studies we did here today, I might go back through some of the architecture. Some of the sketches we did earlier here. I don't know if it's some of these guys, but maybe something like this. We're going to come back in and develop some of these sketches a little bit more and take advantage of maybe slowing some things down to get a little more formidable with some of the sketches that we're working with here, and really do some interesting little thumbnail sketches based on, or maybe a finished illustration on this advanced interceptor study. Well, thanks very much for joining me today. A lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And if you have any commentary at all, yays and nays, feel free. Please always welcome input at my website, my email address at jim@drcontrast.com. Always love to hear from you about what things you're thinking about, and if I can be of any help to you in any way. Some of the things you do drawing-wise, I really would appreciate some hearing from you. It'd be great to see that come about. And again, please visit my website at drcontrast.com. There's a 9-step drawing process there. It might be of some interest to you as well. And again, let me know if you look at that. Let me know what you think of the site. And we're adding some things as we go. We're still trying to get that shop straightened out, and we will get there by hook or by crook. It's getting closer. So thanks again for your patience there. And on that site, you'll see new apparel, for example, new posters, new graphics, new apparel work, T-shirts, automotive, and some aircraft things. We're going to start adding to it as well. So all that to say, thanks so much for your time today. Great to have you on board, and we look forward to seeing you a week on Wednesday, where I think I'll just take this step 2 and do some slowed down variations on theme of these tactical interceptors, and do a nice little job of maybe finishing up a final design sketch here. If you look at it. So once again, I always close with this, because I think it's the most important part of the entire presentation. Never forget to dare to be great, because you are. Always remember that. Again, thanks so much for your time. All the very best, and we'll look forward to seeing you in a week's time. Thank you. Take care now. Bye-bye.